Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pari Center. My name is Michael Weaver, and I will be your host for today's session of The Future World, a conversation series with Àlex Gómez-Marín, the director of the Pari Center. Today, Àlex will be talking with David Lorimer. David Lorimer is a visionary polymath, spiritual activist, and poet who is the founder of Character Education Scotland and the global ambassador of the Scientific and Medical Network. He is the instigator of Beyond the Brain Conference series in 1995 and has coordinated the Mystics and Scientists Conference every year since the late 1980s. David is also chair of the Galileo Commission, which seeks to widen science beyond a materialistic worldview. I will now hand the conversation over to David and Àlex. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for introducing us. Welcome, David. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm speaking from my new habitat at a chateau between Foix and Toulouse, which is just a wonderful space to be in. And I'm sitting under the sort of summer dining area, and it's warm enough to do that, and it's very nice to be with you all here, some friends I can see. And just before we start speaking, I just want to clarify, in case I say something controversial, which I'm quite likely to do, that this is my own opinion. It doesn't represent any opinion of the Scientific and Medical Network. And so if you think I am the Scientific and Medical Network, I'm not. I'm David Lorimer. I'm here in my personal capacity. And I'm sure that we'll be having some interesting conversations about topics that are stimulating and imminent, in both imminent and imminent.
So let's go right into it, because David, I hope to be a jazz improviser of conversation, so we can cut to the chase and avoid any warm-up and perhaps just continue. What would be a controversial topic that you sometimes wish you could talk about and you don't, that we could discuss today to begin with?
Well, that puts me on the spot. I mean, there are so many of them that actually I'm not sure I can identify anything. But I think one of the things I've become very interested in just recently, following the publication of our transhumanism report with Harold Wallach, is the progress in brain-computer interfaces and the military and intelligence applications of that. Going back to the mind control experiments conducted by the CIA in the 1950s, which itself, some of these techniques were taken over from Nazi Germany because they had Nazi scientists working on this, so secretly imported into the US. So that I think that we live in a kind of infosphere, if you like, where we're constantly being shaped by narratives and by stories and by points of view and by emotions associated with these points of view. And I've become very interested, since 2020 in the whole history of propaganda and the way in which these techniques are deployed. And now it's behavioral psychology. It's the nudging unit, which has had huge number of commissions. It was based originally in the UK. And so I think we're unwittingly and sometimes unconsciously in a sort of information war space, and we're also in a space where distractions are constantly seeking for our attention, owing to the monetization of attention as a business model for social media. So there's a few remarks to start us off.
Okay, I'll take it. And incidentally, and I'm not sure if I share this with you in private, David, but I'll share a bit of it in public since I threw it back at you. So let's talk about this. It's important. Well, first, I feel there's a spiritual war going on, and it just manifests at many levels, from the already horrendous just psychological control to maybe more sophisticated and even unbelievable forms. And only recently, I was approached by a man, and I get approached by people, not on the street, luckily, but I mean through contact, through email and other means. And this person was denouncing something along those lines with neurotechnology happening in my own country. And I didn't know what to do with that. It's like, is this person mad? Is this person trolling me? And if there's a chance he's right, then it's so dark that how could I just look at this topic that's bigger, much bigger than what I could do? And then I ask a few close colleagues, very close colleagues that I consider brave as well. And one say, hey, brother, this is beyond your pay grade. Just leave it. I spoke to another person who's very well known in this kind of academic sphere dealing with these topics, artificial intelligence and so on. And the person said, well, we need to pick our battles, and I don't have a lot of time to talk about that. Next topic, please. So I was very surprised by receiving this claim, complaint, and also by the reactions of people I trust and I admire as to, I mean, we don't even touch those things, but I think we should, even if they're very dark and potentially made up. But it doesn't feel like that particular story was made up.
No, I don't think it is. And this is something that I can put a couple of links in the chat later on. But this is something I've become interested in specifically since I met a person who came from to our transhumanism launch, who's advising the committee in the US on these what he calls neurocognitive rights. And so if we think that we have free will or even free won't, some people agree with one and not the other, and then and we have the whole advertising and PR industry, and that uses these kind of techniques all the time. So there's a kind of sliding scale as to what's subliminal, and also what effects you can have on the limbic system, and bringing sort of emotion into it as well. And so I think there's a and the phrase that is key phrase to understand in this space is narrative control. And this is Manuel Castells' work called Communication Power. He's Spanish, I think, isn't he? And I read his book 10 years ago, where he said the real power is in communication, is in shaping perception and influencing behavior. And once you become aware of this as a dimension of the infosphere, then you begin to look more carefully and circumspectly at what is being said by whom, and what end it might have in mind. And I think the one current example, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts on this, is the narrative about the Ukraine war. And obviously, this is a very divisive area, as many areas are divisive. But the European position, as I understand it, is that President Putin is waiting to invade Western Europe, and we should prepare for war. And I find this a quite extraordinary conclusion to draw, because what one needs to be more aware of, and I've been listening to Jeffrey Sachs, Alfred Desaias, particularly Jeffrey Sachs, because his knowledge of this goes back a long way, and Glenn Deason, and these are people who actually understand how this situation evolved since the 1990s. And so if you don't understand that historical background, you don't understand the geopolitics behind it, and even the work of Brzezinski in his grand chessboard, how you need to manipulate and take over certain territories in order to maintain the unipolar dominance of the US, which of course is no longer going to be the case. Anyway, so that's just a case in point. And these narratives are being reinforced every day. I was listening to a German MP yesterday, about the way that that story is being covered in Germany. And then she said that every day the mainstream media is saying, well, we must prepare for war, and therefore we must increase military expenditure at a time when the social fragmentation, social and economic problems in all these countries are really pressing. And the idea that one should not look at these social problems, but instead increase military expenditure, I find it astonishing, but understandable.
How does one know what's true? I mean, this is another big problem we have. Even, and I just, not speaking on behalf of your opinions are your own, as you just said at the beginning, so are mine, but leading organizations, it's sometimes shocking to realize that we can be all in on some topics, consciousness is foundational, for instance, right? But then, and I'm saying this kind of really humbly as a spur for my self-improvement. But then we're all in, we all want the truth, we all want a better world, but then you just tilt the conversation 20 degrees into that topic and all hell may break loose. So it's funny and pathetic in a way how we can be united for certain topics, but then the neighboring one just creates disharmony amongst people who you would think. And I'm not criticizing anyone, really. It's just a shocking realization that we sometimes believe we are the ones just open-minded, but we aren't.
Well, I think this actually raises another very interesting question, which is that there's a book I'm reading at the moment called The Weaponization of Expertise: How Elites Fuel Populism. And one of the things I'm very interested in, and I read a lot around this, is technocracy, which is defined as social engineering by experts, and the experts are whatever experts on but the point, and this actually interestingly goes back to even to the French Revolution. And there's a book I've just reviewed called Princeton University book called.
I think, David, you froze there, or maybe I did.
Oh, am I okay? I think you've frozen actually. Yes, you've frozen. So I'll carry on talking until you unfreeze. And the point that was being made is that the people, the revolutionaries of the 1790s. Michael, should we just pause there? Because I think we've lost Àlex.
Yes, it does look like we've lost Àlex.
He's frozen.
He has. Do you want to continue? Do you want to continue, or what would you like?
Yes, well, I can continue that stream of thought while he rejoins.
That would be perfect.
And so I was talking about this book called The Coming Revolution, which is a history of revolutions. And in the 1790s, you already got these ideas that there's a right thinking and a wrong thinking. And the people who regard themselves as cleverer than anybody else. I'm just carrying on from where I was.
Thank you. Yes, I got kicked out. I'm sorry about that.
The people who regard themselves cleverer than anybody else, they're the right thinking ones, and everybody else is wrong thinking. And you've seen this particularly in US politics, among other things. But it means that if you have a consensus, an authoritative consensus that regards itself as right, then one of the consequences of this is it's your duty to censor and criticize and deplatform and ostracize any other expert who doesn't happen to agree with that view. And this actually undermines democracy, and it undermines the public debate and exchange in the public sphere. And that means in the universities, and this is what the authors say, in the universities, in journalism, and in institutions. And part of the result of this, I think, and this is a very interesting theme, I think, is that it's undermined trust in public institutions, because if you realize that somebody's been telling you half truth or an untruth, then you're not going to trust them. And yet those same institutions think that they can rebuild, they can force you to trust. And that's totally counterintuitive. So the World Economic Forum theme last year was rebuilding trust, as if you can rebuild trust without manifesting integrity, transparency, and truth.
So what's the kind of activism that you do? I mean, many people know, and I do, but let's talk perhaps about, let's move to there, and individually and also through the scientific and medical network and other organizations, what kind of action can be done that's fruitful in the world, given what's going on?
Well, I think there's a lot of awareness raising, and I often have these conversations with friends saying, well, what do you actually do? And what does the network do? And I say we're an educational charity, and our activity is education. And some people feel that education really isn't a proper activity because it should be something practical. But of course, it is practical. And so I think you have to widen your understanding of what activism and action is. I mean, activism is something which is proactive, and we've always been clear in the network that that we're not a campaigning organization. I mean, I suppose there's a gray area in that we promote in the Galileo Commission, for instance, a post-materialist view, but we don't promote a particular post-materialist view. We recognize that there's dual aspect monism, and there's also idealism, for instance, and there might be varieties of panpsychism. And so the Galileo Commission and the network, they don't espouse a particular point of view, but they provide a forum in which people can explore these ideas, whereby consciousness with a capital C is more fundamental than it's regarded in, let's say, conventional neuroscience.
Yeah, I resonate with that, because it's not about removing the materialist flag and quickly just planting the next ism there. It's more like opening the field for everyone to explore more freely about options that have been suppressed.
Yeah, exactly. I think we had an interesting conversation in the Galileo Commission steering group yesterday, because we were talking about putting on an event in Cambridge, partly for students. And Jessica Cornet, one of my colleagues, she's doing a PhD in the psychology department. And I said to her, well, who in the philosophy or psychology department would be open to having the kind of discussion that we would like, in terms of expanding science and maybe, thinking that parapsychology is something worth looking into, which is not the default position. And Vasilios Basios said something very interesting, because his mentor was Ilya Prigogine, the Nobel Prize winner, who was also an honorary member of the network. And we did a big event with him 30 years ago in 1995 with Brian Goodwin and Sir John Polkinghorne. And he said the thing you've got to do is to start from something specific, a paper or research finding or something, and then engage people with that rather than having a kind of philosophical brickbat where you can't sort of get into common ground.
Well, maybe both. Maybe both is an option, because some people like to see the more concrete empirical findings. Others know those are true and they need a frame. I use this metaphor often now. Here, there is anomalous data, and we need to collect more, but then we also need frames for it, and then we need walls to put it on. So it's like these three things. And it depends also on your sensibility, because, for instance, I know the parapsychological community very well. I think I belong to it, and they've been working for decades. And they would say, we know this is true. We have empirical data. Maybe what we need now is a place where we can conceive how that is working. And other people may say, well, no, what we need now is to make it viral. So there are at least three legs, the stool of science, right? that are needed. And when one is limping, we don't make progress. By the way, this brings me to something I wanted to ask you about. This is the 50th anniversary, right, of the Scientific and Medical Network?
Well, it was 2 years ago, so we're now
you see my timekeeping. Well, that's how my mind works. Okay, that was 2 years ago. Well, you're known as the person who knows virtually everyone, and you've been there for so many years. So could you give us a snapshot and an arc of how it's like the famous Twitter meme, how it started and how it's going?
Yes. Well, the network was founded in 1973 by a distinguished group of people. George Blaker, who was a eminent Indian civil servant who met Gandhi. He had some good stories about that. And so Department of Education and Science was his last job. And then there was Sir Kelvin Spencer, who had been chief scientist at the Ministry of Power in the 1950s and was connected with Exeter University. And then there was Dr. Peter Leggett, who was a mathematician and engineer. And in fact, he and George Blaker had been at Trinity College, Cambridge at the same time, but they'd only met each other once. And they had their whole careers and then worked together in their retirement. And then there was Patrick Shackleton, who was Dean of postgraduate studies at Southampton Medical School. And then the person who brought them together was a Polish priest called Andrew Glazewski. And he knew both George and Patrick, and he suggested they should meet because they were both trying to do the same kind of thing, which was to bring together a network of scientists and doctors who were open to mystical experience and spirituality, and open to the parapsychological. So both those elements. And the founders felt that scientific and medical education was really conditioning people into a scientific materialism as the only way of viewing reality, and which was impoverished in the sense that it didn't give people a sense of being rooted in a greater reality, and belonging and connecting. And so the one of the first conferences that they did was at Surrey University on reincarnation, and both Peter Leggett and Max Payne, who was an early member, they wrote a book together called The Forgotten Truth. And so there's always been this interest in these interfaces. Let me just tell you, be more specific about the interfaces, because the interface that we don't major on is science and theology, or science and Christianity. But we are interested in the interfaces between science and spirituality, science and consciousness, science and esotericism, and then science and mysticism. And our two major conferences, the Mystics and Scientists, started in 1978, and the Beyond the Brain, are really focused on the two of these interfaces. And so I think the network's been through quite a number of phases. We used to have a lot more sort of interest groups that met physically at Regent's College, for instance, in the 1980s and 1990s. Now everything, obviously, or virtually everything, is going on online, and so that's a huge transformation. And I think that and then in 1984 there was a kind of spin-off, part of the spin-off of the medical side, where the British Holistic Medical Association was founded by some network members. And then more recently, the Royal College of Psychiatry, Spirituality and Psychiatry Group was founded by members. And a quarter of it's the largest group in the Royal College of Psychiatrists. A quarter of the fellows belong to that group, which is quite extraordinary and unique in the world, actually. And then the transpersonal psychology and consciousness and experiential psychology sections of the British Psychological Society were also founded by network members. And we've had we also, in the 90s, we had some used to meet in continental European countries with our continental meeting, which was really always a small meeting, but then you really get to know people and you have time to dance and to, and for music. So I think we've been chipping away, and I think there is some movement in the direction of reconciling science and spirituality and in science of consciousness. But at the same time, the money is going into an extension of the powerful view. So, and this is where AI and transhumanism come in, because the transhumanist vision, as it were, is the merging of the human and the machine, which is the fourth industrial revolution. And that really, I think, is of the essence of our mission, if you like, because the George Blaker, he said that the part of the mission of the network is to uphold the human spiritual essence as compatible with enlightened scientific thinking. And I think that's an important phrase. And the upholding of the human and the upholding of the human essence, I think, is now even more important than it was before.
Yes, yes. And well, it seems we're going back to the beginning of our conversation, because there's something about the current times that make us pay attention, even though it's sometimes a distraction. It's also we need to pay necessary attention to AI and the transhumanist movement, because it's urgent. And also in consciousness studies, we were, until a few years ago, kind of calmly debating positions, but now we need to hurry up and decide, not prematurely, but at least put on the table what the different theories say about whether these machines or these algorithms may or may not be conscious, or in what way, before people swallow some what are those, propaganda, really, from different companies as to whether ChatGPT, whatever version, should have rights and so on. So it's like the spirit of the time seems to be speeding us up for something that you've been doing for a long time, and yet we can go further in the arc, because I know you know a lot about Rudolf Steiner. We last met in Barcelona at the conference and the festival, and I remember you were giving this workshop on eurythmic, right?
Oh, that's paneurythmy rather than eurythmy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now I've been reading Steiner recently, and he speaks about all of that, but more than 100 years ago, as the unfolding of this phase. So it's urgent and new, but it's been going on for at least 100 and so years. What do you think about that?
Yes, I agree. And one of the essays I read 2 or 3 years ago was the spirits of birth and death. And this made a great impression on me, because what Steiner was saying, and this is, I think, 1921, he was saying that the spirits of birth and death had been working with technology, since the 18th century, and contributing both to the creative and the destructive aspects of technology, because and Steiner described this as an iron necessity. He said that the law of civilizational progress, if you can put it that way, is cyclical. It's cyclical. It involves death and rebirth. It involves destruction and reconstruction. It involves breakdown and breakthrough. And this I think is a hard truth. And I think that's where we are, certainly in Western culture at the moment, that the inner core has decayed. We've lost our connection with the divine, with the feminine, with nature, and so we're totally at sea. We're disoriented, and yet there's also a lot of renaissance going on, off the radar. There's all sorts of NGOs doing fantastic work in all kinds of issues, and there is a there's a spiritual awakening, and I very much agree with you. There is a battle going on. This is Greg Braden's view as well. And there's a spiritual awakening, percolating along at the same time as there's decay and destruction. And so one of the things I'm particularly interested in, and I've got some ideas to produce a course on this, is the theme of spiritual renaissance and cultural renewal. And so how have cultures in previous eras renewed themselves, and what are the principles on which that's been done? And I think that they are spiritual principles, and this is where the Peter Dunoff love, wisdom, and truth as the principles, if you like, are so relevant, because what would it mean, to have a culture based on love, a culture based on wisdom, not just cleverness, a culture based on truth rather than manipulation and propaganda? It would be very radical, and I not only radical, but I think it's actually what's necessary, and that's in a way the direction of my work is to make a contribution to that. I mean, each of us individually can make some contribution. It's not we can't make much of a contribution, but we can at least set the compass in the direction of these principles.
Say more about this. Part of this Renaissance, I suppose, has to do with archaeological work. At least that's how I describe it when I go and read old books. And it's kind of everything is there, and you're a great reader. You also write books, by the way. We can talk about it. You're an author. Where do you find those lost treasures that you would bring, I suppose, into this Renaissance movement?
Well, I think there are a number of thinkers who who I've taken an interest in, in this cultural space, as it were. There's Spengler, Decline of the West. There's Arnold Toynbee, Study of History. There is Piterim Sorokin, who was professor of sociology at Harvard and author of The Crisis of Our Age and also The Ways and Power of Love. And then there's Peter Dunoff, that I've been talking about, and a number of others. Jean Gebser would be another example, whose work I don't know that well. But this idea of a sort of organic, and Goethe, the organic, process of life, the growth and the decay, the death and rebirth. This is something which seems to me absolutely fundamental, also in the rhythms of our own lives. I mean, I've just moved to this wonderful place, and that's kind of ending in a beginning. It's and Goethe's own life was very much shaped by these endings and beginnings, these new cycles. And so I think wherever you are in your life, you can always see that there's a new cycle potentially can emerge. And that's what really aligns us with life. And I think being aligned with life itself, the force of life and the force of love and the force of light, while not neglecting the trauma and the shadow and the darkness. I think this is where we get our real sense of connection and meaning.
Yeah, it sounds simple. It isn't. Is it enough when evil is always lurking?
Well, I think that so far as evil is concerned, Ian McGilchrist is very exercised with this as well, and Jung did a great deal of work in this area. I think that the idea that there isn't any evil is a kind of get out of jail card for evil, and I think that a lot of the mechanism of evil is the use of coercion and fear, and it's a kind of truism to say that fear is the opposite of love, or love is the opposite of fear. But I think that if you look at the the way that governments deployed fear during the COVID pandemic, then you could see that there's and there are freedom of information emails, say, from the British government, for instance, saying that actually we need to dial it up a bit because people aren't complying sufficiently, and so they're not afraid enough. So we make them more afraid. And I think this is quite out of order. And this the destruction aspect of it, but also the fruits, the intent can be good, but the effects can then sometimes be destructive. And I think a vast majority of people do what they think is right. And there aren't so many people who are intent on really doing what is wrong and evil. And so but it's a very, very it's very, very hard to be sufficiently discerning in this area, I think.
The flip side of all of that, you touched on it a bit when you mentioned these interfaces between science. I really like that comment. Science and mysticism, esotericism, theology, even this renaissance you're talking about, this organic renaissance. And I'm gonna formulate a bad question, and then we can improve it. But can it be done without God? Meaning, are you trying? And I know one needs to be here, not just strategic, I mean, authentic, but also mindful, right? But is it still a secular project? Is it a post-secular project? What's the role of religion there? If you see what I mean, what goes beyond the natural, all of those things, I believe, need to be in the equation. But are we prepared? I mean, many questions there, but that's where I'm pointing. It sounds
Yes.
nice, life or organicism. Yes, is that enough again?
Well, I think that in a way, the secular Enlightenment project has showed itself bankrupt. Because if you look at what's happening to nature, the exploitative capitalism, financialization, turning everything into a commodity, wrecking ecosystems, soils, but all in the name of economic growth, in a system that demands further growth, and and then the corresponding dehumanization that's going on, which you also get with scale. The larger the scale, the greater the dehumanization, and the greater the centralization, the greater the dehumanization. But I think the a purely secular approach, progress in inverted commas, has really run its course. And I know that Ian is very much of this same view. Has this huge section in the matter with things on the sacred, and the re-sacralization. The perennial philosophers, Syed Hossein Nasser, Philip Sherrard, and others, they too felt this re-sacralization. The king, he's been saying it for 30 years. We need to the rebirth of the sacred, and I think the sacred is, and I prefer the term sacred, is intrinsic to life. It's intrinsic to beauty. It's within us. It's the ground of who we are, which is a microcosm of something universal. And so I can't see that the project of Renaissance can occur independently of a spiritual ground, of a re-sacralization. I don't know whether you would agree with that, but that's my view.
I do agree, and I've lately felt that maybe more is needed, because if evil is there in the world for real, then we need a lot of help. And so a post-secular time like this would need some sort of reimagining the role of religion together with science and all the rest, and the arts and the humanities, but for real, right? Not just as a compromise where they sit on the table. Like, for instance, in the topic of near-death experiences that I've been talking a lot recently about it, and I recently finished writing my first book in Spanish about it, and it made me, advance my thinking by doing that. And I realized I knew it, but I see it more clearly. People go after science sometimes as the 21st century religion, and so I don't want that burden. But at the same time, I wonder what other religions are willing to contribute back in a very healthy relationship between main things, between the artists and even philanthropies, you see, to bring them back into the picture. And the root of the word means loving mankind, right?
Yes,
So I
absolutely.
think we need whatever 2.0. I'm a bit obsessed with the 2.0 now, and I don't like it because it's kind of a software metaphor, but we need science 2.0, religion 2.0, economics 2.0, and without all the parts, including the God part, I don't think we can make it.
Well, and what it means to be human. I mean, what's missing from a lot of modern discourse, and particularly technocratic and technological discourse, is the heart. And and that I have a colleague, Louise Livingston, who really works from that point, that space, the heart space. And that's the feminine, it's the divine feminine, it's the sacred feminine. It's what Anne Baring's new book is about, the divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, the forgotten feminine face of God. And so rediscovering that part, both in men as well, the feminine side, and for women to come forward, embodying this this love, this concern, this care, this protection, this inspiration. I think that is really critical for our time, and it's about embodying it. It's about because what's been neglected and cast aside is the woman nature and sexuality as well. There's a further aspect to that.
Yes, and I would add to it, at the risk of indulging into controversial topics, that even feminism has been co-opted and perverted into what it shouldn't, with perhaps a good intention. So all of those movements end up being distorted when they're badly needed.
Yes, I think I see that the feminism was at least partly a political project, and but what in a man's world, a lot of women had to behave like men in order to get on in the man's world, which is not feminism, or it's not the feminine. And maybe we should distinguish between the feminine and feminism. And this is a become a quite a contested space, but because I think that the the whole gender issue has come up to the forefront, and that's being driven by ideological factors as well, and there's a lot of money behind this too.
You see, now I also think about transgender, and that's also in the review. I've read a great deal of the transhumanist review that you were mentioning at the beginning, Àlex transhumanist review, and there are many topics there that are hard to bring to the public sphere, even in a small circle like this, like the likely entanglement of transhumanism and transgenderism.
And artificial reproduction.
Yes. I was hosting some friends this summer. We were in relaxed mode, and the man said, "Oh, Àlex, I've listened to you many times here and there, but what do you really think about this?" And I realized that there are many things I cannot say yet. Not that I know them, not that I have the truth, but since we started with this and I wasn't expecting it at the beginning of our conversation, all these points there, like even when we're talking about it, we walk carefully not to hear the click when you step on a mine, you know, like click. Oh, now how do I leave? How do I move my foot without
Yeah.
losing a leg? You see? But we must. Even, you know, there's 100 and so people listening to us now live. How can we talk about this without any one of you getting pissed off? Or if you get pissed off, how can we build the trust in the community so that we know we're discussing this because it's hard and it's for the benefit of all of us?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of weaponization around that you know, if you're not for us, you're against us. And you're not, and if you're not really either allowed to take a nuanced view. You know, there has to be, you know, it's basically black or white. And then it becomes good or evil. And so there's this sort of ideological polarization and self-righteousness that means that your view cannot be questioned because you have the right view.
Yes.
Anyone who questions you, I mean, well, there can't be a person of integrity. You know, we can't really speak to these kind of people. And so what I think you're arguing, and I very much agree with this, is this: where's the open space? Where's the space in which we can listen deeply to each other, despite our differences, and say, well, maybe I don't know, and maybe you don't know either. I mean, Charles Eisenstein has got to this state where he said, well, I don't know whether I can just recommend what anybody should do anymore. You know, I don't know.
Yes.
And that in itself is a feature of complexity.
Totally.
Because we tend to think that we can bring a simple solution to a complex question, and that really is never going to work, and it just compounds the complexity.
Yes, and it's not anything goes, nor just think whatever you want, I'll think whatever I want, whatever. It's a kind of communion that it's so hard to get. You deal with a lot of people, David. How is this done, right? Like it's another art. You read a lot, you know a lot, but then the pragmatics of this, how do you keep a community not necessarily growing? It's not about growth, but in tune.
Yes. Well, I suppose that you know, we're always subject to birds of a feather, and it's much more comfortable to talk to people you agree with than to talk to people you don't agree with. And that's everyone will have had that experience. Some people are very combative. Now they love a really good argument. But most people are more you know, quite sensitive. And you want to sort of put a feeler out before you you know, say exactly what you think. Because it could be, and it could blow the conversation out of the water, as it were.
Yes. Maybe doing things together, I've discovered. Like I went to a survivalist course, and when you need to lead a fire or just purify some water, your metaphysics is not what you're most concerned with at that moment. And at the same time, I've also experienced during the pandemic not being able to go for Christmas somewhere because of differences. I mean, it's really incredible what ideas, you know, what ideas can do for good and for bad.
Yes, it's when you identify with the ideas, and you know, I've often thought recently of the Einstein-Russell nuclear disarmament campaign in the 1950s, which was also joined by Albert Schweitzer. Norman Cousins persuaded him you know, to do this, and their slogan was "Remember your humanity and forget the rest." And I think we're at that kind of moment. I've said that a few times over the last few months. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. Because that's really what's at stake. And that humanity is, as I said before, is related to the heart and to feelings and to sensitivity and to beauty.
You have this title, right, of one of your works, Better Lit a Candle, isn't it?
Yes, that's the title of my poems.
Yes.
Better light a candle than curse the darkness. It's a Chinese proverb.
Yes.
And it's very easy to curse the darkness, and we do it all the time. But then the trouble is that you then get caught up in it, because about just over 10 years ago, I gave a lecture called Wise as Serpents, Gentle as Doves. And this is what Jesus said to his disciples. He said, you should be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And the way I interpreted it at the time was to say, well, you need to know the shenanigans in the world and what's going on, and try and understand the dynamics of it and why it's happening. But you also need to, your work and attention should mainly be on the constructive, the creative, the contribution that you can make. Otherwise, your peace of mind will be quite shattered. But at the same time, we're here to engage with this complexity of the world, to sit in it, to sit in the mess, and we're not necessarily called to solve. We're not called to solve all the problems. Let me just see if there's a piece that I'd like to quote, which I've been meaning to put up on in social media for a while. But this is John Kavanagh, SJ. And he said, I was very struck by this. He said, in the end, it is not our task to end the sin and suffering of the world, or to stop the mindless march of violence. It is rather to follow a different way, to take opportunities, small as they may be, to reduce hatred and carnage, to let go fears, and to entrust even our poor inadequacy to the hands of God. This is taking up our daily cross. And I was struck by that sentiment, and because I think a lot of us feel that we should be somehow solving the problems of the world, and that we aren't in that position. We're positioned to provide some inspiration and take some action. But the world is much larger and more complex than we are as individuals.
Yes, fixing the world is what transhumanists are after. And that's the great disaster, actually.
Well, and fixing death as well.
Yes, yes. Do you wish to finish this conversation, time flies, with reading a poem of yours?
Yes, let me do that. Let me just go to my file, new poems, and then see what comes up. Yeah. Well, here, actually, this is one I wrote. I reviewed a book by Byung-Chul Han called The Spirit of Hope. So this poem is called The Spirit of Hope. And there's a quote that he says this, to live means to hope. Poetry is the language of hope. So here's my poem. To hope beyond hope, capital H, is to aspire to the impossible, and yet to the not yet possible. To trust beyond trust in the ditch of despair is an orientation of the spirit, a dimension of the soul, the power of awakening, the power of resurrection, the power of rebirth. To attend to the other with love is devotion to life itself, the dawn of divine radiance, brightening the world, redeeming our motives, purifying our intent, cleansing our hearts, fortifying our courage to stand firm in the swirling turbulence with those cast adrift at the maelstrom, isolated in frigid fear. Coming into being is coming into being, capital B, tenderly touching one another, drawing close in resonant empathy, co-creating peace from within, inspiring beauty, sowing seeds of hope in the fertile soil of cosmic spring, dreaming forward the vision of a new Earth, cohering in co-creative communities coming together. A lot of my poems end with the word together. and my collection, which I think will come out next year, I've still got a few more to write and refine, they will be called Being Together.
Thank you, David. I've been doing this for 4 years now, and it was about time you came and joined us here in one of these conversations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Thanks so much, Àlex. And now we're ready to move on to the question and answer session where audience gets to participate. Please use the raise your hand function under reactions if you'd like to ask a question. And please also keep your questions pointed and succinct so that we can make sure to address everyone, seeing as we do have a small amount of time. Shrivastava, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask David and Àlex your question, that would be fantastic. Yep, there you go. Though we can't hear you, but you are unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I really like this conversation, and I just wanted to I have been thinking about conspiracies and delusions and stuff like that for years now. Something happened in my life which convinced me our understanding of the society is not where it should be, and it's very good to see people being willing to sit rather than concluding what is going on or a particular issue, but just being willing to understand the dynamics of what is going on. And I believe the crisis which we have, I think the most important aspect of the crisis that we are facing right now is that it's a crisis of information processing. It's a crisis of we are struggling to make sense of the world. And the reason why this crisis become so pertinent right now is because we just don't have complexity. We have complexity which is accelerating. We have more and more technology, more and more movement, more and more complex financial markets, which is producing a specific kind of psychological dynamics. And these were seen at the time when the print media became readily available. And after that, the age of TV came, and we kind of forgot all of that. And the internet comes again, and the same kind of thinking starts again. But now we also have the technological complexity. For example, there are people want to feel they know the world, and the reason, but our minds are not built to understand the world. So that is leading to a very complex system. And I think a lot of times when you try to read books of conspiracies, they have this one thing, why conspiracy theories are wrong and why misbeliefs are wrong and stuff like that. But I think what is happening is a very complex psychological process is taking place in society, which has a lot of different layers. And I really liked how both of you were comfortable with that idea that, rather than concluding that this is going on or this phenomena is more important or that phenomenon is more important, I felt like you were more willing than most people to accept we don't know. And you mentioned Charles Einstein, and I've been familiar with his work as well. And that I think is very important, that people really sit back and observe the process, the psychological process which is going on in society right now after the social media has blown up and everything.
Yes, thank you very much for those very interesting remarks. I think it's not just a crisis of information processing and the speed and information overload, but also it's crisis of meaning. And often people put information front and center in a new view. But I support the position of Federico Fagin in his work, where he says it's meaning, and David Bohm said the same thing, it's meaning that's absolutely central. and that's where we've lost this connection with our center, with the stillness. And not only has there been exponential increase in complexity, but also in speed and acceleration. So progress is equated with acceleration. And this doesn't do our mental, emotional, spiritual health any good at all. And so I'm very keen on slowing down. And that's why I love, slow food, even slow sex. The slowness, not the because if you live life in the fast lane all the time, then you're sooner or later you're going to hit something head on. And so I think that's a question we can ask ourselves as a practical one: is how can we slow down? And I read a page every day of the Tao Te Ching. It's part of what I read at breakfast. And the being in harmony with nature and slowing down and embracing the unknown, and without feeling you have to solve everything. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be lived, if you put it that way. Àlex, what are your thoughts on that?
I love both of your comments because there are always the questions of who am I, what am I doing here, and so on. But then there's another one, which is what is going on? It's like,
Yeah.
what the f is going on? And it's so hard, right? Because there's conflict, confusion, collusion, conspiracy. It's like the perfect storm. And so, but I've started to enjoy this. I think Ray Kurzweil is right for the wrong reasons, or wrong for the right reasons, when he says the singularity is near. I don't think it's in the way he means it. He borrowed it, by the way, from, isn't it in the Apocalypse? John says something very similar. So I was reading
the Omega point.
Well, yes, the Chardin and all the rest. But I think we're living apocalyptic times. And apocalypse means the unveiling. And so when something is unveiling, it's like, wow, it's like when I have young daughters now, but I remember when I was a kid, and the thing that would scare me the most was the Michael Jackson Thriller, where at the end he goes and hugs the woman, and then you see the eyes. So I would watch that like this, right? So I think right now we're living an apocalypse, the apocalypse. And so earlier in my life, I was a bit bored. I thought like, I would have preferred to have been born in the 19th century. I didn't know about reincarnation then. Maybe I had already.
Yes.
But now I think this AI horrendous thing that's happening, it's just speeding everything up so that we must do what your poem, I think, conveyed to me. Bootstrap ourselves. It was all about bootstrapping. It's like the times are pushing us harshly to evolve as a species.
Yes, I very much agree with that. I feel that we've set ourselves an evolutionary challenge of unprecedented scope.
Yes, some difficult homework so that we either do it or perish in doing it. But yes. So that's what's going on.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Srivastava. Niels, if you'd like to unmute yourself, I'll spotlight you so you can ask your question for David.
Hang on.
There we go.
I can't see the screen.
We can hear you and see you well.
Yeah, but I like to see your calm faces talking about the chaos of this world. I have a lifetime of living in the spirit. I was born in the middle of the Second World War. We were occupied by the Germans. I grew up in Denmark. And it's a long story about actually suffering and things, but this thing in me brought me through into another world, a world of thought and understanding and calm and peace. So I'm beginning to realize now that I was groomed for this time now, because 35 years ago I knew where to go with this, but I was simply, my throat was cut over, and I was, what is it called, gated institutional narrative. Have you heard that from Eric Weinstein? And I think this is what we are talking about. It's actually a crisis in understanding, as you were saying. We need to understand. AI, like they're presenting now, doesn't understand anything. I was lucky to discover what true intelligence is, which I can now call superintelligence. But I've tried that. I've tried to write papers, and it doesn't awaken people. But I'm beginning to see that there's an awakening coming on, and there's a desire for breaking out of this chaotic, insanity is the best description of it. I would love to come here and tell about my life and where I am, because it would fit in here, because I'm not worried about what is going on. I'm concerned that we learn to understand how to understand. And
today, Niels, I saw you smile, and I usually don't. It's a good sign.
Well, I'm full of joy every day, but sometimes when you talk about people, about real things, it's very difficult to, because if they start talk, they always start getting angry, and then they distrust you, and then and say it can't be like that, and then you try to explain why it can be like that.
Yes, can I comment on that, Niels?
Yes.
I think you certainly convey a sense of calm and depth, which I really appreciate. And I think that one of our responsibilities, and that's our main thing we can do, and Eckhart Tolle stresses this
Yes, I'm aware of him, yes.
Is to manage our own state. But because spiritual practice is also a matter of managing our own state, because the world is as it is, and we are as we are, but we don't need to be totally caught up in it.
We're not caught up. No.
No.
No,
so I
not
think
at all.
And that's also maturity. I think it's maturity not to be not to care. I mean, T.S. Eliot famously said, "Teach us to care and not to care.
Yeah.
Teach us to sit still." Comes from one of his poems. So thank you for those reflections.
I'm writing a piece called "The Supernatural Nature of Nature: The Impossible Process of Everything." That's that's my take on the world, and that's where we are missing out. AI is not AI. It's not intelligent at all. They just blabber around in all the useful dirt and things. Sorry, I'll back off now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. Okay. And now, Mary, if you would like to jump in, I will add you to the spotlight. Mary.
We lost her.
You too lost her.
Yes.
Yes, she was.
Sorry. Hi.
It's okay. There we go.
I don't
Great.
know how that happened. So I'm very much I'm so happy and pleased to see the conversation turning towards positivity and openness. When we when we look at, I'm in the process of completing review of a book called Mutopia, which is about the cause for optimism with the climate, which comes when you and all of the living systems of Earth, including food and grasslands and rain and so forth, which comes when you interrogate really deeply the resiliences that haven't yet been examined in the models. And my husband and I, who's a rancher and I was a biologist, now I guess I call myself a natural philosopher. When you look at life with the idea that there's a lot of things that are still in superposition, I'm now going to the quantum idea. There's a lot of things that are in superposition at all times, and it's how we witness them. And using that term across lots of different approaches from mystic traditions to the quantum is how it changes the outcome. If we're willing to witness the positive opportunities for resilience, then maybe we bring those things into possibility. So I don't know, we had like 10 pages of references in this book, and we went out to a lot of the scientists and said, what do you think of our idea? And they all loved it. And these are people who don't write about resilience, who don't write about climate. They all said, yeah, you've hit on something. And so I feel like we need to encourage generalists to understand a little bit about quantum and the perennial philosophy, and then to be able to go to the world with optimism and look for resilience that has not yet been described. And so I used to describe myself as a sort of Popperian, make really good conjectures, but you can't make really good conjectures until you've even informally sort of eliminated a lot of possibilities for disproof mentally. And when there's a lot unknown, there's a lot that can't be disproven. So why not be positive? Sorry, that was so long-winded.
No, I think that's a lovely point. And I think resilience is key. I mean, look at the resilience of those who survived the camps in the war. Viktor Frankl, one of the best known. The impossible conditions that people were in, but he quotes Nietzsche, and he says that the last freedom is the freedom to choose your attitude. And so this is all about the perspective and the resilience, the suffering, resilience through suffering is a hugely important life lesson. And when we look back on our lives, it's often the times we suffered that has taught us most. And so this may apply to humanity as a whole. And let me say, I love your old piece of furniture behind. It looks like a French armoire, a sort of cupboard.
I think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm in the Southwest, where it's amazing what people just give away when they move.
Okay.
So we have a sort of an old European New England house in the middle of Colorado.
Right. Yes, I can feel the presence of that splendid piece of furniture.
Well, that's a segue to what I wanted to say. When you said make good conjectures, I smiled because we recently visited this neighbor we have in a country house. He's 95 years old, Mr. Gallego. We always go there with the girls and he always gives us something. I don't know what we give him because I can't produce anything, but he gives us eggs and figs and also honey. So maybe rather than make good conjectures, make good honey or make something or make a piece of wood like that behind, right? So, and that brings joy. Yes, the world is in danger and so on, but still you can spend time with this 95-year-old person and you come back and you have for dinner the eggs and the figs and the honey that he gave us. And also learning from my 6-year-old. Sorry?
You can make a great clafouti with your eggs, honey, and figs.
So when we say the world, well, what world are we talking about? Like when I ask my daughters, what did you like most about the summer? They say, that ice cream we ate in that swimming pool. It's like, really? Really? Well, that's so the world. There are many worlds going on, and there's a lot of room. Maybe not. Maybe it's, well, you read about hope. You wrote about hope, David. Well, it's a hope that maybe beyond hope. It's a hope that it's not just hoping for something good to happen. It's right, in a way, it's right here. And so, yes, I speak out loud about the evil that I see, but I'm also very happy when I come back from this stroll through the countryside with eggs and honey and figs.
I think that's a wonderful
Alex,
trilogy.
you're really underscoring my point. You have no proof that we are doomed. You have no concrete proof. And if you don't have a disprovable conjecture, then it's imperative upon us to engage in the path of least suffering, which is to be hopeful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great.
Well, that's one of the one of the lines. Hope is an orientation of the spirit, and that is attributed to Václav Havel. And I think that's a very important point about hope, because it's not hoping against hope, or hope for the sake of hope, or hope in the context of ignorance. It's an orientation of the spirit, and I think that's your resilience, your injunction or your conjecture is an orientation of the spirit.
Great. Thanks so much, David, Alex,
Thank you, Mary.
Mary, for joining us with your question. Fabio, if you'd like to join us, I'll add you to the spotlight. You're still muted. Still muted.
Attiva audio. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're good now.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for the very nice talk and very inspiring talk. I have a very simple question, but in the beginning, almost, you mentioned a spiritual awakening you are seeing in the world. I see young people that are quite different from me. And maybe do you have a sensation about this, or do you have some kind of quantification or the quality of this spiritual awakening? Because I don't see that as a participation in the church life, but I see that young people are actually, in a sense, that I don't fully understand, in a way, more prone to gentleness many times and so on. But do you have a quantification or qualification for this?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and I'm concerned with young people as well, and I was a teacher for a long time, and I'm not sure. I think the spiritual awakening is probably coming more from the more mature people than it is from the young. But I mean, that might be an arrogant thing to say and might be completely wrong. But I do think that the challenge of being young now is greater than ever. No, but because of the technology and the sort of evacuation of the inner life, because Federico Faggini he talks about a science of interiority, and as opposed to a science of exteriority, an objective, a subjective science, if you like, and so I think that the cultivation and putting this in the way of young people is very important. I'll just tell you a quick story that I heard at Bonnevaux on Sunday, and this was a man from Canada speaking on Zoom, and he said, I was with some children who were meditating, and I asked a 7-year-old, what is meditation for you? And he said, just to be with God. I was staggered that out of the mouth of babes, comes this wisdom, meditation, just to be with God, and to be with oneself and to be the inner. So I'm noticing it more, I suppose, in my own milieu, and I get a sense of this, but I don't think I could quantify it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's a good question. Thank you, Fabio.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
I can make 3 quick points, but they are not data. Let's not take them as data. Well, on the one hand, what kinds of kids do we think are incarnating today? I mean, if there's more to this whole story than the standard tale, then in a way we can relax and know that these kids that are coming, they chose or they know what's going on with these times, and that's why they came now. Maybe that's a hand waving, but that's one way to think about new generations. Because if there's life beyond death, and if we somehow come back, maybe we also decide when and with whom. And so that's more than hope. That's one thing. Then there's another side of it, which I'm not so happy about it, which lately, and again, this is not a very politically correct comment. I'm not going to say something horrible, but it's just not very politically correct. When we go and have a walk with my family, I've started to see people around their 30s, I'm older, walking with one dog each. And I think, shit, are these their kids? And if you have a dog, I have a cat, I'm cool. But there's something also about future generations and not wanting to have kids. And well, the other day, my daughter said something very funny that doesn't have translation in English about, well, maybe these are their dog progeny in a way, right? So let's just put that there. And then the third point I wanted to make is, I know a very influential doctor here in Spain who's super popular. He fills in theaters and he sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his book. And he's an old man, a retired doctor. And he told me, yes, I have this more older range of followers, you could say, people who are closer to death and they just want to go to the old person to tell them it's going to be all right. But a lot of young people who have even attempted suicide, or have thought about it. And then they listen to what he's saying and they say, wow. I mean, so this is a kind of an awakening too. So you see many levels, the kids reincarnating, the young teenagers who are really screwed. So they're more thirsty for this. And then maybe the 30-year-olds that, because poor guys, I'm sorry, I think they've swallowed all the bad vices of just pursue a career, make a lot of money, and postpone having kids, or even having kids is bad. And here they are walking their 2 kid dogs. So yeah, diversity.
Thanks. Thanks, David, Alex, Fabio. I think we can field one more quick question from Pam. Pam, if you'd like to jump in with a quick question, and then we'll round out afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And thank you so much. A brilliant, fantastic talk. Loved every minute of it. So I've been doing some difficult homework on myself for donkey's years on the idea of being. I'm a painter. What is it to be? So I'm just going to throw something out that I actually did try to introduce on one of the Beyond Bohm sessions. And it's to do with the word remembering, because I think we've forgotten an awful lot. So I was thinking about remembering, and like a lot of words that begin with RE, there's usually a verb that follows, like return, resuscitate, etc., etc., etc. But remembering, remember is not a verb, it's a noun. And so I began to think about, what am I a member of? And because I have been thinking about this for such a long time, I decided that I am a member of the earth. And I've forgotten this. And I just have this deep feeling that if we could all forget about religion, forget about all of the things that divide us, and recognize that we belong to the earth. It might sort of take away lots of egos around the place and center us into what we really might be. And we have to remember ourselves on a daily basis in order to get out of this, as everybody agrees here, I think, total chaotic madness that's going on. Anyway, I don't really have much more to say about it. I'm working on it all the time, thinking about it, making paintings about it. But I feel it's important to introduce maybe something that's a little bit off center. But thank you so much. That's all I want to say. I've loved this evening's talk. It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Pam. Do you have a painting that you could share with us? Do you have anything right with you?
Not tonight, no. I did the thing with Lee Nichol last year.
Oh, yeah.
You can find it there, but no, not tonight.
Well, yes, I think remembering, I mean, there's many religio is related to that, isn't it? The remembering is a re-belonging,
Exactly.
coming to belong again. One of my favorite quotations from Plotinus, the great Neoplatonic philosopher, is remembering is for those who have forgotten.
We have forgotten.
And that applies to all of us. And I think that's part of the project of life, is to remember. And he also said, which I think is very, very subtle, it's probably more subtle in Greek, we are within a reality that is also within us. We are within a reality that is also within us.
Thank you.
I really like to look for the hidden treasures in words. So thank you for that. Like splitting the atom, but just splitting words and then realizing what's in there. And the exercise is even more fun when you speak more than one language, because in Spanish, remember is recordar, and cordar has to do with the heart. So it's going again through the heart. So here you go. Find your favorite language and open the magic cookie to see what the word is telling you.
And in French, it's rappel, to recall.
Yeah.
You can find it in every language you look for, I think. But I do thank you both very much. It's been a lovely talk.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Pam. And
Thank
you, David and Àlex. And any final thoughts, final comments, insights?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, I think. So I don't think there's a conclusion to be drawn, because we've gone through a number of avenues of exploration. But I think the sense of exploring together, that we've been able to do a bit, with Àlex and myself this evening and with you, is sort of thinking out loud, and we need to deliberate and think and feel together if we're going to be able to feel our way into something that's more constructive and harmonious. And harmony is a really key word here, I think. So I hope that you feel a little bit of fortification, of inspiration, and that you'll maybe even slow down for part of the day.
I agree. And I came from summer break that I really needed. And a few days ago, I was a bit kind of shy and lazy about doing this again. But now once we're back into this dance, I know why we're doing it. Another word from this was coined by Whitehead. By the way, it's good. We can make up words to make up reality. So I think he invented this word concrescence, isn't it? Concrescence? Yeah. Grow together, right? And he has this famous quote that I don't remember. Maybe, David, you do. The one is increased by one, or the two. It's something about 1 + 1 = 1, but it's 3. Something. He was a mathematician, right? Well, I think that's what's happening when we do this. In a way, we're growing together. We're concressing, and it's beautiful when it happens, and it often happens.
I love that concrescence. Maybe that's what we can take away from this evening, to grow together.
Thank you, David.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you,
both.
David. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Àlex.
as always, to our audience. And
Thank you.
please take a look at our website, see what events we have coming up in the future. And also, if you enjoy our programs, please consider becoming a member if you're not already. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Take care.